and we are back with another mini episode of the Game of Thrones podcast, and this time we will be discussing Fire and Blood, the upcoming book that will detail the life of the Targaryens 300 years before A Game of Thrones. George R.R. Martin recently released a small tidbit about it a while back, and that's what we'll be taking a look at today. If you're watching this on YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, whatever, don't worry, we'll be sure to leave a link in the description below, as always. And before we begin, I just want to give a big shout out to another YouTuber, Men of the West. He's a Lord of the Rings channel, and might I say, probably the best Lord of the Rings channel on YouTube. I've been always meaning to shout him out, but it always escapes us. But yeah, big shout out to Yoyston from Men of the West. Definitely check out his channel if you're a big fan of Lord of the Rings, and if you do check it out, tell him Carmine sends his regards. Also, this Fire and Blood podcast episode was recommended to us by someone on my Patreon, so big shout out to them. We actually weren't going to do this, but I decided to do so, just based on the recommendation, because I didn't really know this came out. But now I do, and thank you to that person. Okay, so Preston, welcome back.
Thank you. It's been a while since we've recorded something.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're a busy dude, traveling the world, seeing all it has to offer.
Yeah, it's true. I'm actually currently in Turkey at the moment.
Don't tell people that. What if people come to fucking find you and have you sign random T-shirts?
In Turkey? Okay.
You have a lot of Turkish fans. I'm sure you do.
I'm sure. It's a beautiful country filled with beautiful people.
Preston's on a secret mission in Turkey. He can't really talk about it.
So, Fire and Blood.
All right, so really quick, in one sentence, sum up what this book will be about, because I actually didn't read the excerpt, because I wanted you to explain it to me and give me your thoughts. But what is this? Is it like a historical guide like the Silmarillion with Lord of the Rings? Is it an actual story with characters like the main books? Or is it like an encyclopedia of Targaryen history, kind of like The World of Ice and Fire that came out a few years back? What is this book?
So some people have been calling it the George R.R. Marillion, George R.R. Marillion, in that it's kind of a boring history, rather than being a story like Ice and Fire or Dunk and Egg that, flows along with protagonists and plot and things that you can connect to. Mm-hmm. But I would say that comparing it to the Silmarillion is also kind of wrong in that the Silmarillion gives ancient history and goes through many ages and gives a long it covers a long stretch of time, while this just covers Targaryen history, and it's from the Targaryen point of view. So you're still going to not get what's going on in the rest of the Seven Kingdoms and world, and you're not going to get what's going on, for thousands and thousands of years before, and that's there's nothing about the Andal invasion or the First Men or the Children of the Forest or things like that, because it begins with Aegon's conquest, and will bring us up until I imagine Robert's Rebellion.
So it's a detailed account of the Targaryens in Westeros, because I actually thought, I swear I heard someone say that it was going to be a detailed account of their journey from Old Valyria all the way to Westeros.
I don't know if that's going to be covered. So the Targaryens, they didn't quite, so the history of the Targaryens move to Westeros, is there was one Targaryen, and she had a vision that Valyria was going to, fall. She tells her dad to move to Dragonstone, and so they moved to Dragonstone, and the Targaryens are actually on Dragonstone for about 100 years before they even think about invading Westeros. The rest of Westeros, if you consider Dragonstone Westeros or not. But they moved there. And I imagine that they also convinced the other Targaryen houses to move there, or maybe they already had those islands. The other Valyrian houses, like the Velaryons and the Celtigars. I imagine that they moved it at the same time, but it's hard to say. We don't really know much about their history. Mm-hmm. And then there's the big mystery of why they chose to invade Westeros when they did. That might be covered in the book, but I think I think it's going to somewhat begin with Aegon's conquest, but maybe it'll begin with Daenerys the Dreamer's like visions. We don't quite know.
Now, the one thing I'm a little confused about is because, and I swear I heard this from somewhere, that George R.R. Martin was going to release something like this, like a big Bible-like tome of a detailed Targaryen history right after he finished the series. This is supposed to come after Winds of Winter and of Dream of Spring when that's released in 2044. Tell me, why is this being released now? And I actually have a theory as to why I think it is, but go ahead.
He did say at first that he was going to release it after Dream of Spring, and so the fact that he's now releasing half of it now is a new thing. And there's kind of a reason for it, and that is obviously he's massively late on Winds of Winter, and I imagine he wanted to throw people bones to so that he doesn't feel so bad for being late. And so the first thing he'd done is he'd already written kind of a rough history of everything, or he had it in his head. And then he decided to like flesh out the first piece, which on the Dance of the Dragons, called The Princess and the Queen. And that was released in an anthology of stories. And so he had The Princess and the Queen out there. And then he also had written The Rogue Prince, which was about a time little bit before The Princess and the Queen, leading up to the Dance of the Dragons. And so he had those two then. And then people came forward and said, hey, how about you have this rough idea of Targaryen history. We want to do The World of Ice and Fire. What can we put in that? And so George R.R. Martin kind of like gave a lot of notes to Elio and Linda about the Targaryen history, and a kind of rough, like abbreviated draft of Fire and Blood is in the World of Ice and Fire.
Well, let me ask you this: the World of Ice and Fire, like we all bought that. I feel it was kind of a waste of money because. Yeah, it does go into a lot of, detail about certain houses and certain eras and certain characters. But at the same time, a lot of the history you do want, or at least I wanted, like a detailed history of each, even minor houses. Like, you don't even need to give me, like, full-on houses. Like, even minor houses like the Mormonts or, the Tarleys. There isn't a detailed account of those houses, which is something I was looking forward to. They just have stories about stuff that happened in history that doesn't really matter to the overall story. Do you think the World of Ice and Fire is kind of pointless now that this is coming out?
I do. Some people would say the reverse. Some would say that this is pointless coming out because we already have the World of Ice and Fire.
How is that even true? Because this is a detailed account of one family.
Right, but the idea is that the World of if anything major happened, the World of Ice and Fire would have already covered it.
But you actually kind of explained this. I think it was one of our podcast episodes a while back. You kind of explained how if you paid attention to the World of Ice and Fire, George R.R. Martin is careful not to let Elio and Linda write too much history about certain places, kind of like the Free Cities and Ashai.
Yeah, I mean, the World of Ice and Fire does not. The World of Ice and Fire is very, very careful not to spoil anything in the main story, and Targaryen history is kind of. I mean, obviously it's before the main story, as our main story takes place, 17 years after Robert's Rebellion. But there's a few things in there that might give away some major plot points, perhaps with the Blackfires and things like that, and why the Blackfires were rejected. But he has a lot of, like, the World of Ice and Fire. All the places that have really detailed histories are the places we don't care about, and all the places that we care about have no history at all. So we have nothing on Slaver's Bay, and we have nothing on Karth, which were actually major parts of our story. But we have a nice little chapter on Lorath and things like that, and with Targaryen history, I think I think perhaps there's some major spoilers in the second half of Fire and Blood. And so because George R. R. Martin had already released Princess and the Queen and The Rogue Prince and Sons of the Dragon, and he has the Aegon's Invasion excerpt in the World of Ice and Fire, and he has the basic structure of Targaryen history like outlined in the World of Ice and Fire, that because all these pieces were already there, then he might as well just fill in a few more and then release the first half of Fire and Blood. And that way he's throwing a bone to the fans, but he doesn't really have to write that much more, considering he already had, Aegon's Invasion, Sons of the Dragon, Rogue Prince, and the Princess and the Queen, like all there. So he just needed to fill in a few holes here and there, and then he could release a book.
So you think he's just releasing Fire and Blood to kind of throw a bone to the fans?
Yeah, I think throw a bone to the fans, throw a bone to his publisher. That's what I think it's about.
I still believe, we discussed this before, it's not really my theory, it's someone on Reddit's theory. I still believe that he has some kind of deal with HBO not to release a new book until after the show is over, because this is the longest he's ever gone without releasing something.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, unless there was some new...
Because he's literally releasing everything but The Winds of Winter. And unless The Winds of Winter is going to be the most epic book of all time, like, I'm just going to jizz my pants every chapter. I don't know, man. I seriously am starting to believe that Reddit post that George R. R. Martin likely has a deal with HBO, like a hush-hush deal, not to release any new content to, drive people away from the show, and to wait until after the show is over.
I personally think he's rewriting it. Like, I think he's rewriting The Winds of Winter to be different from the show. That's what I think is taking him so long.
That's actually a pretty good one too.
I mean,
actually, you
yeah.
think so?
I mean, I was just thinking how pointless it would. Like, I was actually making this joke the other day to somebody. They're like, "Why is it taking so long? Isn't it going to be really weird when the show's over and then these books are going to come out?" Like, imagine if, like, all of a sudden I was like, "Carmine, man, are you really excited for the novelization of Raiders of the Lost Ark?" And you'd be like, "What? Why should I fucking care about Raiders of the Lost Ark, like a novelization of Raiders of the Lost Ark? It already fucking came out." Like, right? Like, no one gets excited for the book coming out after the television or movie has come out, right? Like, no one gets excited about that. The book comes out first, and then people get excited about the movie adaptation of it. Like, that's how things work. Imagine if tomorrow they were like, "Oh, we're going to do a Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, like, book, where it's the same events of the movie, Newt Scamander and all of that, but..."
Did you watch Harry Potter recently? Is that what you're trying to tell me?
I watched not Harry Potter. I watched Fantastic Beasts recently.
Did you like it?
It was okay. It was fine. It was
okay. I don't know, man. Can we expect some Harry Potter?
I've never seen that. I've watched Prisoner. I've told you, I've watched Prisoner of Azkaban and Goblet of Fire, and I've watched Fantastic Beasts Part 1. And
I'm afraid your fans are afraid they might lose you to the Harry Potter craze if you get into those books. Careful.
Well, I mean, it's my wife really loves, like, Harry Potter, and she hadn't seen Fantastic Beasts, so I watched it with her, and she wants to see this new movie when it comes out in a couple weeks. Anyway, so
I'm sorry, we're getting off track. But no,
we're getting off track.
Tell me about the excerpt. Like, what is it involved? Like who's in it? Is it any characters we know? Like, what's going on with the excerpt?
So the excerpt is it's about Queen Alysanne and her journey north, which is a little interesting. I mean, to a big book fan like me, where Queen so for me, like, I have this big theory about Queen Alysanne going north to the Wall, and everything she kind of does there. Like, she's in the original story, she's famous for ending the Lord's right to the first night, moving the Night Fort, expanding the gift, and all of these things. And I have a theory that she did it because the Night's Watch was sacrificing children, and she like did not want that anymore. She didn't want, like, I believe that like people, the Lord's right to the first night was producing excess bastards in the north. They were taking the north to the wall, and these babies were getting sacrificed. And my theory is that Alysanne like wanted to shut this whole thing down, whole operation down.
What video series was that you made? Was that the Craster?
I mentioned in Craster, and I mention it in Minds of Wolves and Robins.
Gotcha.
But yeah, it's in the Craster's Keep video where I talk about it pretty extensively there. And so that's my theory that Alysanne did this. The excerpt does not mention any of this at all, because the excerpt is from the perspective of Maester Gildane, and so he doesn't mention anything about it at all. The excerpt is pretty dry, just talking about Alysanne going north and her relations with Jaehaerys and Alysanne's relationship with the Stark and Winterfell, who was named Alaric Stark. He's not in the family tree at all. He's kind of before the Starks we know. But the most interesting thing that people have been kind of buzzing about in the excerpt is the fact that Alysanne's dragon didn't want to cross the wall.
Oh, why not?
Well, that's the big thing, right? Because in the show, obviously, the dragon flies right over the wall and, gets killed and becomes a white dragon and all of that. But then there's the question of why would this dragon cross the wall, which gets into another Preston theory about like what's going on with the wall. So I have a theory that the wall is a barrier to telepathic abilities, and that and this is evidenced by the fact that like so when Jojen, when traveling with Bran, before he crosses the wall, he's like old for his age, like his personality is old and wise for his age. But then when he crosses the wall, he's a scared child. And this is mentioned, like there's this like big switch in Jojen's character once he crosses the wall. And so this idea that perhaps somebody was telepathically like influencing Jojen when he was south of the wall, and his telepathic ability has no like ability to cross the wall, and thus Jojen changes to the child that he should have been when he goes north of the wall. The other is that Jon has trouble sensing Ghost. When Ghost is on the other side of the wall, he can't detect him. And so, and then the other big thing is that there's a mystery about Orell's eagle. Do you remember Orell? Doesn't
Melisandre kind of burn him in the books?
Ah, yes. Yes. So yeah, that's good. See, every once in a while I quiz Carmine, and he
oh, you
passed
motherfucker.
This one.
Okay.
He passed this one with flying colors. Yes. So Orell is the wildling that Jon kills when he's north of the wall with his trip with Qhorin Halfhand. He sent up this pass, and he kills this wildling Orell, and then he doesn't kill Ygritte. He's not actually given, Orell isn't actually even given a name in A Clash of Kings. He's not given a name until the next book, where we find out that Orell was actually a skin changer, and he could control an eagle, and the eagle is taken over by Varamir Sixskins after Orell is killed, and Varamir Sixskins takes Orell's eagle and is flying it during the battle for Castle Black, and then all of a sudden the eagle bursts into flames for no discernible reason at all. And, it's this big, horrible, painful experience for Varamir Sixskins. And no one knows why this happens. So Jon just kind of, there's a throwaway line where Jon says, I imagine we have you to thank for that. And, Melisandre says something about the Lord of Light or something, but she never thinks about it. And it's never in any of her abilities. Like why would Melisandre be able to like cause an eagle to burst into flames for no reason? Like, we have no explanation. She never thinks about it. And so, we could just say that Melisandre didn't do it. And then the question is why would an eagle burst into flames in the middle of the sky? And my theory is that the eagle tried to cross the barrier of the wall, and that's what caused it to burst into flames, that it was a telepath trying to cross the wall while warging, or while skin changing.
Wait a minute. So you're telling me that at no point throughout the history of like the Wildling Castle Black conflict, hundreds of years, there wasn't a warg who at one point on the Wildling side of the wall warged into an eagle and then tried to fly over the wall? Because this is something they should know if it happens fairly often.
I mean, it's a good point that, like, shouldn't at some point somebody know about, like, traveling over the wall with a skin changer or something? Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's never brought up. So we don't know.
Because if the wildlings are constantly climbing the wall all the time, they would obviously use a warg as a scout, like they do with Orell, and they would probably have that skin changer warg into an eagle multiple times, just to kind of scout out the area to make sure that when the wildlings get on top of the wall, there's no one there, and obviously would have to cross the over the wall multiple times. So that's why I kind of thought it was Melisandre and her just being modest. The Lord of Light works in many ways.
I mean, that's a very logical. You're being very logical, and it's true that like my theory would have that hole that you'd think that every time there was a raiding party to go over the wall, they'd be like, all right, who's got a skin changing bird? And okay, let's try it. Send it over. It's like, whoa! I'm not gonna skin change close to the wall. That's bullshit, dude. And everyone go, okay. Yeah, I mean, you're right. That's.
But at the
logical.
same time, you could also argue for your theory here that it wasn't until Mance Rayder united all the clans, because if this had happened, they would have been divided as they were before Mance Rayder came out. And I'm assuming the times when the wildlings would try to invade over the wall, they would go as clans and not like a united force. So if there was information like that, they probably wouldn't have shared it with each other because they were divided. So I guess that's how you plug that theory.
The other idea is that Varamir Sixskin, that this wasn't Orell who was familiar with his bird trying to go over. This was Varamir who knew nothing about birds. Varamir Sixskins, like he was fresh to skin changing birds and maybe wasn't familiar with the process.
Would you also argue that Varamir Sixskins has a higher telepathic ability to skin change into animals more so than Orell, who can only do an eagle? Can't Varamir Sixskin do like multiple animals at the same time?
Yeah, no. Varamir is the second strongest telepath that we've come across in our story. I mean, after Bran, I would argue that Bran is the strongest telepath, but Varamir Sixskins is the second strongest telepath that we have in our story. Yeah, so. I mean, he was really strong. I mean, you're maybe he was, I don't know, more ability or
so
something.
So what if the wall just prevents strong like it probably doesn't prevent like weaker telepaths like Orell, who can just work in like skin change into an eagle, whatever, it doesn't matter. That's just an eagle. He's not that strong, but Varamir Sixskins and even Jojen that has some ability, and even Queen Alysanne, the wall would definitely block them, but someone as weak as Orell, I'm sure wouldn't really matter. They would probably let that pass. I mean, they'll probably let that through.
That's an interesting idea, that it's like that it would be like a metal detector that like weak like small amounts of metal could go through undetected, but not large amounts of metal. Possibly, like we say, but there. I mean, it is a hole in the argument that shouldn't it be famous that birds can't fly over the wall to wildlings, and that somehow Varamir didn't get that information. I admit that it's a bit of a hole.
But you can plug that hole.
Yeah, I can plug it with the idea that Varamir's not familiar with birds.
And the metal detector. You can plug it.
Yeah, but my theory is that there's this telepathic barrier in the wall. There's other holes, by the way. There's people communicate through dreams through the moon over the wall, but maybe they're bouncing it up and over. I don't know. But nonetheless, this is like a small thing where the dragon doesn't want to cross the wall. Perhaps it's because dragons are telepathically linked to their riders, and if you're crossing the wall, there'd be a big problem. And a dragon might burst into flames trying to cross the wall, just like Orell's eagle. I don't know.
Well, maybe Orell's eagle burst
know.
into flames because I doubt a dragon would, because it's so big and powerful, and it is flame incarnate, whereas an eagle is just
So that was kind of the big thing was like, why doesn't Silverwing want to cross the wall? And no one really knows.
Was that the only like huge thing about that excerpt?
To me, yes. They didn't mention anything about Alysanne's, like, it's almost odd how they're silent about, or the excerpt is silent about, like the expansion of the gift and the moving of the night fort and all of that, and her staying with the free folk. All of the plot points about Alysanne from Ice and Fire are not in it, which is strange that it's all kept out. But the rest is just about like the Stark, which I don't know. I mean, if I read it more closely, maybe I'll find something. Which these passages, what's rough about all of these passages is that they are meant for close reading, where
like you do.
You have to say, okay, yeah, but I wonder who would be a fan of it. Like if I did like a series on like Fire and Blood, like line by line, which is kind of what it requires. Like I don't know how many people that would be interested in
Which
it.
brings me to my next question. So this is clearly George R.R. Martin's, I guess, Silmarillion, but he's kind of releasing it a bit. He's kind of shooting off his load a bit too early here, because I kind of expected something like this to come out after Winds of Winter and A Dream of Spring, if those are the last two books. We'll see what happens, because I hear people always saying, like, you never know with him, it was originally supposed to be 3 books, and then blah, 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 and...
Right.
So it's weird that I kind of want this to be his Silmarillion, but at the same time, I also want him to release detailed accounts of other houses, like maybe the Starks, Lannisters, and even I don't know.
Tullys? You're a Tully fan?
Who the fuck's a Tully fan? What the fuck?
I mean,
who the fuck is a Tully?
I mean, one thing that makes me like being a contrarian at heart is like one of the reasons why I'm a House Aaron fan, because no one's a House Aaron fan. I mean, maybe now that I've like pumped up the Sweet Robin hype, a lot of people are Aaron fans, but nobody's a Tully fan.
But no, he could release like a Silmarillion-esque anthology. Or not anthology, a series of books where like we go through a detailed history of Targaryens, Lannisters, Stark, Baratheon, and even the other houses too. Because the great thing about A Song of Ice and Fire is that every single house has their own little game at play, their own like characters, their own pieces on the board, and there are people who, obviously we're all supposed to be rooting for the Starks, but there are people who like the Greyjoys more than the Starks, who like the Martells more than the Starks. And, we got a lot of Lannister fans, too, because the Lannisters are awesome. My question to you is this. Is this a book for casuals? And I don't mean that in an awful way. I mean, like, people who just watch the show and are kind of wanting to get into the books. Like, would you recommend this to them? Or is this a book for diehard A Song of Ice and Fire fans?
I think it's a book for diehards. I mean, even I have real trouble, like, reading... the history stuff without my eyes glazing over. Like it's not exciting. It's not, the references that you're going to catch are you have to know the story very well to know what they're paralleling to and things like that and that kind of stuff. No, it's for diehards.
You think so?
But oh yeah. But
will you be making like a video series on this?
I think I will. I think I will eventually get into the details of it. I mean, I'm getting pretty close to the end of Prepping for Winter, and where that with that level detail.
Prepping for Winter has been ongoing for like 1,000 years, man. You're getting close now.
Going line by. Yeah. Well, I got 2 more chapters to do. Tyrion and Mercy. And so it's coming. I don't know, maybe. Yeah, I think, I'll read it first. I'll read Fire and Blood first and then decide. But, just look at how many words it is and just, see if I really can go through it. Like, whether I want to go through it line by line or whether I, just want to like go through summaries or something.
Well, good luck. It'll take you a while because it has over 700 pages. It has over 700 pages. I probably won't be picking this up just yet. I hope there's an audiobook version of it. I know Roy Detrice, may he rest in peace. He's gone, so they might get a new person to get the audio. Yes, it is.
Yeah, I forget who did the audio for Princess and the Queen, because they do have an audio of that.
Oh yeah. Let me see this.
Yeah, let me.
Okay, so by the way, this is not a promotion for Audible, but I'm sure you guys have seen the Audible like free trial bullshit. You can get Fire and Blood with your free Audible trial, which is something I might do. But by the way, guys, just so you know, the book will be released on November 20th, 2018. You can pre-order on Amazon. Once again, we're not promoting the book or anything like that. We're just letting you guys know. It says here the illustrations by Doug Wheatley. So is this kind of going to be like Fire and Blood in the sense where we get like random illustrated stuff, or?
Yeah, no, there is some illustration in it. So I some of the pictures were posted.
I'm kind of annoyed now because I really want like a Baratheon type history thing, like this.
Isn't that the kind of funny thing that they're like, I mean, Targaryens are not my favorite house. There's some people's, but I would be much more interested in a different, like, rather than it be Fire and Blood, like it being I would rather have a Dornish history myself. But
not a House
I think
Aaron,
that would
you
be
trader?
much more interesting. I mean, that's the thing is we know so little about House Aaron that we haven't gotten into that history yet. So, I mean, it would be interesting in the sense that we know nothing about House Aaron. So it would be great to have something. But with the Dornish, it would be more like, it'd be more about flushing out some of the details of major events and stuff like that. And obviously with the Dornish, there'd be a lot more sex and violence.
So did you like this excerpt? Was it all right? Would you recommend it for like any normal fan to read it, even a diehard? Is it worth it?
No, for a diehard, for everybody else, it's like, no, it's very dry. It's very dry. It's very dry history. It's hard to be like, oh no, it's fantastic. No, it's not. It's a dry history for super fans. And even super fans have to struggle through. It's really hard to get into. It's not, I'm not lying. Like, it's like, especially like, and what the only thing that's interesting about it is that like Gildane is going to be lying about certain parts. So we don't know, we can't trust what he says. And so you have to decide like, well, what is Gildane lying about? And what was the real history? But then you're left with like more questions than answers in the thing. Once you sort of question the source, and so
well, this is why you're here to solve these questions for us as best you can with as tinfoiliest theory as you can. So,
I guess. I mean, I almost feel like if I did a video series, I'd be trying to make it more interesting than it is. But, yeah.
Jesus.
No. I mean, look, I'm gonna get it obviously, and I'm gonna read it, and like I'm gonna pick it apart, and so we'll see about what happens in the future.
I'm gonna get the audiobook. Fuck that. I love personally for me. I love like getting the audiobook while I'm playing a game or just laying down with my head in my pillow. Just I like to like just turn off all the lights and just listen to like either music or like a podcast or even an audiobook. That's how I like to unwind and do my stuff. So I highly recommend that for anybody if you guys are on your way to work or maybe at the gym or stuff like that. It's it might be a good read, but if you are a casual fan, if you don't give a shit about the history of Dany's second cousin twice removed, then I probably wouldn't get it. I would just probably watch someone's YouTube video.
Right. I mean, even so, I did the audio, like Princess and the Queen, I was struggling to get through it. And so I did the audiobook for it. And I would listen to like 15 minutes at a time. because that's about all I could take before I like wandered off. You know.
You know what's... I know it's going a bit off topic. You know what's probably the best audiobook I've ever listened to? World War Z.
Oh.
Hold on. Who? I know the guy's father is a famous... The guy's father did Spaceballs. World War... Not the book, not the movie, of course, but the book. It came out in 2006. Max Brooks. His dad is Mel Brooks. And...
Oh, really?
He basically did essentially the story of a reporter going around the world after the zombie apocalypse happened and humanity has survived. He's going around and making a collection of individual accounts from all over the world of what people went through during the zombie apocalypse. And at one point, even Mark Hamill lends his voice to this as a soldier during the Battle of Brooklyn. Where a bunch of United States Marines, try to stop a horde of zombies from, breaking through. And it's one of the best audiobooks I've ever listened to. And I highly recommend it to you. I know you're probably not a big zombie guy, are you?
I mean, I went through my zombie phase, but I think I'm done with it now.
Yeah, really? Well, I highly recommend this one because the one thing I love about horror is anthology series horror. American Horror Story I kind of like a little. The VHS series I like. I love Black Mirror on Netflix. That's a bit horror sometimes. I'm glad they're remaking Twilight Zone.
A bit horror. Isn't Black Mirror like the worst horror ever? Like everything's fate worse than death. Your consciousness is going to experience boredom for 1,000,000 years.
Well, regardless, I just love the anthology stuff, and this is kind of like that. He goes around all over the world, asking people how they survived in this part of the world. It's fantastic. But yeah, no, to anybody listening right now, the World War Z audiobook, highly recommended. Recommend it to you too, Preston. But let's wrap this up. Guys, thank you so much for joining us on this mini episode. Preston, I'm serious. I'm expecting a video series about Fire and Blood. You better get on this.
We'll see. I mean, it comes out in a month. We've got time.
Guys, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you all next time. Have a good one.